All right, so today is April 18th, 2026. Going to walk through an updated presentation of how the alignment economy works, why it's necessary, and kind of hopefully give a quick overview here. So please reach out with comments, questions, and feedback. So essentially, the way to look at this is that when technologies start existing, they take a little bit of time to get adopted. And so if you look historically, moving from horses to cars, pre-1886, horses is how you did transportation, right? And then there was a pretty long period, 10, 20, 30 years of tinkering and building cars, right? The first couple cars, maybe 1886, they're loud, they break down, really only enthusiasts are using them. Most people look at them and say, this is ridiculous, right? Why would you ever want this thing? But eventually, at some point, they perfected it enough, right? There became the Model T, and this started leading toward more mass adoption of transportation. And if you fast forward to today, essentially no one uses a horse as their main mode of transportation. Basically, everyone uses motor vehicles, right? I want to argue the same thing is happening with money, in that historically we've had centralized control of fiat currencies. These have been used forever. There's been a technology invented, blockchain, that is, I would argue, similar to the car to the horse jump. It's a pretty big jump, but similar to the horse and car. There's a lot of enthusiasts using it. It's loud, it breaks down. It's not very usable. There are some problems. There's a lot of scams out there. And I want to argue that we're continuing to evolve and that something like the alignment economy could be the Model T of money that we're able to shift, where at some point people will look back and say, ha, I can't believe people ever used horses, or ha, I can't believe people ever used fiat currencies. There's better ways to operate. And so there's a kind of way to think about everyone has different parts of where they are on the funnel here. And some people what I can kind of coin as like traditionalists, skeptics, Bitcoiners, and people that are ready to build the bridge. Traditionalists, these are people that are mostly going to say, like, I don't get it. The dollar, the economy seem to be working fine. Most folks, I would say, are over here, that they don't really spend much time thinking about inflation and how the currency has lost value over time. There's some people that get it and say, yep, okay, I know this is kind of broken, maybe against centralized currencies, but cryptocurrencies are scams. And I would argue with them or agree with them that yes, 90% of them are scams, but we both agree that something needs to be fixed because this isn't really working, right? And then there's a lot of people that are called maybe Bitcoiners, people that are in this. So it's like, oh, Ethereum or stablecoin XYZ is going to be the answer. We need to use that. And now, as we jump in here, I'll argue there's kind of maybe two things of first mover advantage and deflation that are plaguing any current blockchain technology at the moment that we need to solve. And I think there's very few people that see this problem and say, okay, we got to build something different. And that's where I am trying to be this bridge builder between some of these historical fiat worlds towards a blockchain-based currency that actually can be used each day. And so I think there's kind of three core things to understand. First is that for this first group is trying to understand that, okay, fiat is failing. For this second group and the kind of third group of really like Bitcoin cannot solve this. And then for anyone who's hung on with me the whole time, start walking through how I envision this alignment economy can actually solve a lot of these problems. So the summary here with fiat failing is that it's being printed without limit. We'll zoom in about how it's lost a lot of purchasing power over time. It's not measuring things that are actually contributing value, and AI is about to make this a lot worse. In terms of Bitcoin, there are the first mover advantage, meaning those that got in early got a disproportionate share. The deflation paradox, in that no one actually wants to spend their money because they hope it goes up in value. And some say, okay, what about stablecoins? But stablecoins are still fiat. And basically, there's no usable currency at the moment. For the alignment economy, it tries to be focused on being spent by burning points each day, by giving points each day. There's reducing the first mover advantage. We'll talk about a thing called rebasing. This helps prevent deflation and inflation. And it also, because there's daily point allocations, makes value visible, essentially. So summary here, but we'll jump into some of the details now. So in terms of fiat failing, the first thing to think through is think about what is money actually. And I'd say a lot of people in that first bucket maybe don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. I would argue that it's a measuring stick. We create value for others, right? I build you a house, you grow me food. We then exchange that for money, right? Which we use to obtain the value that we want or need, right? And I would argue that value is the organization of matter and energy within time and space that benefits attention. And that's a little complex, but essentially saying like humans are units of attention, right? And matter and energy, we need a car to transport me around. I need some food to eat. I don't need it yesterday. I need it today, right? I don't need it 20 years from now. I need it in, Denver as opposed to Boston kind of thing. Um, and then there's also comparison, right? In that there are certain things we're going to value more than others, right? I value my car more than my shoes. Shoes are important, but I can quickly replace those, or I have a different pair versus this car I need to drive me from point A to point B. So it's a lot of relative comparisons with value. So a lot of people haven't really spent a lot of time thinking about this. But one of the things that we can kind of look at from kind of two perspectives here, we'll talk about kind of maybe more the Democrat, more the Republican kind of sides of this in the challenges with fiat. And so since 1913, like the dollar has lost 96% of its value, and that's because we've printed more and more of it. So essentially, your savings are buying less. No one is able to audit or really control this. It's a small group of people in a small room that decide the value of your currency by manipulating interest rates and money supply. And so, what's happened over time is that like your grandparents could buy a house. Basically, today, a lot of people are really struggling to do this. And again, people who don't spend a lot of time thinking about it or haven't meant it, it's like the weather, right? It's just something happens. You don't really feel like you have control over it necessarily. It doesn't feel like something that's being manipulated behind the scenes. It just kind of feels how life is. So that's kind of let's say, the Republican kind of view. In terms of the Democrat kind of view behind this is like money has never really measured some of the really important value, right? Like a mother raising the next generation, or nurses working at 3 a.m., teachers or people mentoring other younger folks kind of along the life path, maintaining public spaces, especially for a lot of education, like you're forming the minds of the future, and those are some of the lowest paying jobs, right? And so um, we're not really counting a lot of this very well, even though we can nudge you and charge you for every single click you do on the internet, right? And so like we have the technology to track this kind of stuff if we wanted to, but being able to figure out how we can actually compensate folks for value that isn't currently being compensated. And then I think the bigger one that's more of I kind of consider like a global view here is that the growth of AI, and I think a lot of folks again haven't spent a ton of time thinking through this unless they're in the space, is that AI is taking off dramatically here. And there's going to be a loop that's going to happen where AI and robotics are going to get better and better. Like there's a lot of companies right now where their entire model has been destroyed because OpenAI or Claude released some feature, right? And this is going to keep happening where white collar jobs especially are going to be able to be automated very quickly. You won't need a human there, or maybe you need one human in the loop, but it's going to move fast. That's going to eventually move into blue collar jobs as well, where robotics could at some point come be the plumber, right? I mean, that's a bit further down the line, but it's going to happen eventually. And so from a company and ownership perspective, there's no reason you wouldn't want to be bringing in AI and robots to do the job because they work much longer and much cheaper than a actual human. So that's going to cause disruption and job displacement. When that happens, governments are going to have to react, right? They're going to not want to get overthrown or people to go rioting in the streets. So they're going to be a bit like the COVID playbook, where they're going to be putting out stimulus checks, bailouts, ensuring that folks are not in the streets rioting necessarily. The trouble is this is going to cause inflation, especially asset price inflation. So we've seen how since COVID, housing prices globally have skyrocketed in most countries and become unobtainable for a large percent of the population. But the people that are already in and own a house, they don't want to sell, or they don't want the pricing to go down, right? And so stocks, everything's at all-time highs, even though we're in the middle of a war. This is going to keep happening because the inflation is going to keep going. This then causes even more challenges for those that don't own assets that are rising with the inflation. So let's say your blue collar, everyday white collar workers, their cost of living is going up and up. Again, if you start looking and paying attention, you'll see inflation has gotten pretty big, especially in the last 5, 6 years. This is going to continue. They're going to then ask for higher wages, and the companies are going to say, well, why would I want to pay you higher wages when I can hire AI or use a robot? And so this is going to keep spinning and spinning. And, if we're talking about how maybe there's kind of Republican view here, Democrat view here, this is a global view where we've all got to figure out some new economic system to get out of this loop as quick as possible. So some folks would say, okay, Bitcoin can solve this. I'll say Bitcoin cannot solve this in that there are a couple challenges that it can't. So it is very true that like decentralized consensus and value transfer, like this is very real, very powerful. But what's happened over the last couple of years, 10, 15 years of this, like it was designed to be a cash that people are sending back and forth, but it's really become a speculative asset and that folks are holding it, not spending it because they know the price is going to go up relative to the dollar, increasing their purchasing power. And so I'm kind of calling these two paradoxes. One's first mover advantage, which we'll jump into here in a second, and the other is deflation. So in terms of first mover advantage, this comes from Porter's five forces in starting a business. And excuse me, being able to be the first one to the market, you typically can have a lot more success, which is very true in the Bitcoin case where folks are able to get a lot. Those that are coming in the future are going to have to pay much higher. They're not going to be nearly as interested in wanting to jump into this because it feels and somewhat is a pyramid scheme, right? You could say the dollar is also a pyramid scheme, but is there a way that we could make it so that people aren't disincentivized to join the system because they feel like they've missed out on the opportunity, right? A similar thing is with deflation in that people spent bitcoins. There's a famous transaction for 10,000 Bitcoin for pizzas. It's worth a lot of money now. Basically, the lesson that everyone's taken is don't spend, right? And that makes this not a currency. If no one's spending it, then it's not a currency. So we need to find some sort of way that people are not worried about inflation, not worried about deflation nearly as much, right? So we're talking about the dollar. Inflation's too high right now because the supply of money keeps increasing. With Bitcoin, because the supply is stable and demand is increasing, that's leading to deflation, which again causes people not to want to spend it. So is there some sort of middle ground where we could have limited inflation, limited deflation that keeps a relatively stable price and be able to use this currency actually in transactions? And so this is what a lot of people are very excited about stablecoins, in that stablecoins are a one-to-one mapped with the US dollar typically. And this is great because you then have stable purchasing power. You're not like the dollar where it's inflating. We'll talk about that in a second. You're not like Bitcoin where it's deflating. What's happening, and the reason I don't think this is the answer, is it is still inflating, even though it still equals one-to-one dollar, because the overall dollar supply is increasing. It's really just electronic fiat. There's no difference here. So it's still very inflationary. It's still centralized. We'll talk more in a minute about still not compensating motherhood kind of thing. What is going to happen, and this will keep happening, is that it is much faster plumbing. So the entire banking system, the financial Wall Street, is all going to get rewired here in the next, say, 2 to 7 years with stable coins because it makes so much more sense. So that's going to happen. And if you want to place bets, not financial advice, but that's probably a place to place some bets. But I would argue this is just solidifying the current fiat regime. So is there a way that we could figure out how to solve this? And that's where I believe we have these different design requirements for what the system of the future should look like, in that there needs to be decentralized control. So this is a blockchain. We need to figure out how to minimize first mover advantage. If we can make so folks get funds no matter when they join, there needs to be stable purchasing power, so not super strong deflation or inflation. There needs to be some sort of incentive to transact, so we're not just holding it, hoping the price goes up, and then really this underlying visibility of contribution, right? And that a lot of the things that hold society together, motherhood, mentorship, caregiving, these have never been economically compensated. And so is there a way that we can provide some sort of basic income for those folks as well? So I think that this is where the alignment economy jumps in that there are, let's say, three kind of unique things that we've put together here in a system, and it's creating a unique product, on my understanding. So the first is that there's daily point allocations, and that everyone gets 1,440 minutes per day. So you also get 1,440 minutes of, 1,440 minutes of points that get kind of, let's say, airdropped or allocated to you each day. There is daily rebasing, and that if you think about that, well, okay, great. If everyone gets points every day, that's going to inflate pretty quickly, right? So the idea here is that we rebase the system every day. And what happens here is that we take a look at every account at the end of the day, and we reduce the total number of points in each count proportionally. And so it seems complicated, but when you get the math, it's not that difficult. It's a simple, probably fifth grade math problem, maybe third grade in Asia, fifth grade in the US. But essentially showing that we're going to reduce, if you had, let's say, 10% of the total supply pre-rebase, you would also have 10% of the total supply post-rebase. The number would just have dropped down. And that way we're preventing massive inflation because of these daily point allocations. And I'd say, okay, great, I get those two, a little crazy, but it makes sense. Well, why wouldn't I just create a bunch of bots to get a bunch of points every day, right? And so that would be an attack that folks would definitely want to do on the system. And so instead of using a miners to do math or stake, we would use miners to do proof of human. And so there's kind of like a court and bounty system that goes through to determine, is this account a real human with a unique account? You don't have duplicate accounts, you're not a bot. And being able to go through that process helps maintain the integrity of the system. So this is all very ambitious, but I do really believe it's possible. And we'll go into some of the details here. So in terms of point allocations, every human being gets the 1,440, like I talked about. This is what I call active points. Those come every day. You can spend these however you like. If you don't spend them, they will disappear, right? So one of the things about this is, okay, so maybe there's a stay-at-home partner. They're still getting 1,440 every single day, right? These next three are ones that perhaps we would not launch with at the beginning. I do think in the long run, it would be very useful. Excuse me, the next two, supportive and ambient, in that supportive points would be things within your environment. So I'm using a desk, I'm using a computer. If those things last longer, the manufacturer should get more money versus if they break faster, they should not get as much. So those are a way that we could create, whether it's smart contracts or me allocating the points to say, okay, yep, this fridge has been running for 20 years. It's going to get 20 years of income versus this fridge broke 1 year after I bought it. It's not making as much. And this would help reduce planned obsolescence, which has become a pretty big challenge in our current economic system. Same thing with like ambient points, in that I'm in a physical place. I'm in America, I'm in Canada, I'm in the city. Could be using this as a way to kind of do taxes, right? Where folks are riding on public transportation, could they be kind of automatically paying for that transportation just because they're on that transportation? Or being able to, show, if I'm a good city where people want to come, then I should be getting more tax revenue. And this could be a way to help perhaps solve some of this. These are much more difficult than something like this to build. The active is relatively simple. These ones are a lot more complex. There's obviously privacy concerns. No one would have to do these if they didn't want to. If you don't allocate it, then it's not going to get spent. It just burns out each day. But I do think that this could be a interesting structure longer run. The fourth bucket, we would definitely have active and earned at the beginning. Earned would be if someone sent me their points, their active points or supportive or ambient points, I would then be able to save these. And so this is where the savings layer comes in that if people are sending you points, which we would assume is people agreeing that you've added economic value to them, you then are able to save that. And so even though this percent may go, the total may go down each day, the percent would stay the same, therefore creating wealth over time based on how much contribution you give to the economy. This is some of the details in terms of the rebasing, in that there's what we call a rebase multiplier, the target, and then divide that by a rebase total. This is some of the math essentially of how that works. So the idea is that point value would stay relatively equal throughout the entire process of it. And again, this isn't anything that's controlled. It's a decentralized blockchain that's running this. In terms of the proof of human, again, it's a percent score. It goes 0 to 100%. There's 3 miners that would rate you when you first sign up for an account. Those miners get assigned accounts randomly, so there's no way that you can necessarily know who's going to be reviewing each one. They then give you a percent human score. You're able to then get that. You can bump that up, and there's no set rule that says, oh, you have to give us your biometric data, or there's many infinite paths to this where you could be using, okay, I have just other friends that are willing to vouch for me, or here's my government ID, or here's a selfie, trying to figure out the right way to do this. There's many, many ways to do that. And then in terms of enforcement, there is a court system with a bounty, in that miners can go out, hunt and search and find folks that are running multiple accounts or bots that are running accounts, and being able to go through this. So there's a whole level of detail behind all this for those that are interested. So essentially, the two main things that the alignment economy is doing is solving those two problems that Bitcoin and others have. So there's the first mover advantage and the deflation are both kind of solved, in that whether you join day 10 or day 10,000, you're still going to get the same amount of points allocated each day. And then in terms of deflation, because we are rebasing, so the total pie is shrinking or being maintained stable, throughout the entire running of the blockchain, your percent will stay the same. Say for your purchasing power stays the same, but it prevents runaway inflation or runaway deflation. So I really believe that this is something we need to spend a lot more time on as a group of society thinking about. Obviously, automobiles didn't replace forces overnight. Same thing's not happening with blockchain, but I do really believe we need to keep pushing on this. And I think that with the way AI is moving right now, with the way inflation is moving right now, we have to make some sort of shift very quickly. I do think we're running low on time a little bit. And so I really want to make sure that we can create a new system that's going to be able to count this invisible labor, that's going to be able to count, products that last a long time. That's going to be a new type of taxation that's going to help protect purchasing power through a blockchain, not necessarily relying on politics. So if you're interested in this, please reach out. I'm trying to find other folks that are willing to help build this. If anyone's interested in kind of helping fund this, as well as just connecting and introduce us to other people within your network that may be interested in this. So if you made it this far, thank you so much for the time and enjoy the rest of your day.